Okay, all right, welcome. This is my little slot in the microcurrent therapy workshop. I did this last time and it seemed to work. I talked about something else. But I'm going to talk about a little aspect of supernoetics. You heard that word and maybe saw it on the flip chart. It's just my word for what I do, sort of advanced thinking models, lots of hacks and tips and protocols and things that work. The term supernoetics itself is a registered term, and I've also registered the slogan, working for the purposeful transformation of humankind. So I'm not saving the world or anything like that, that's going to go on long after I'm dead, but I want to be able to purposefully reinvent humankind. I want to get us as much as we can out of irrationality and stupidity and fix things, and listen, it's a rule in life. We're in Vegas, okay, so I know about gambling. I've never gambled a shilling in my life, but I know the rules. They call it minimax, and the idea is to minimize anything that might hurt you and maximize any chance of winning. You do not have to be right 100% of the time, and that's a life principle, okay? And here in Vegas, if you can be right 51, 52% of the time, eventually you'll break the bank. Think about it. You're going to win more often than the bank wins. So all we have to do is get things better than they are, have been so far. It doesn't have to be miraculously different. But having said that, I've got a lot of ideas that I think are fairly miraculously clever, whether they come from upstairs or whatever. That was an example of what I can do, and I could do lots of that. I've got a thing called the complex of self, or the glass elevator to God. I've got another thing called the constellation of a chord, which is a sort of anatomy of relationships. I got some stuff, and I'd love to share it. Anyway, I'm going to talk specifically about what came. Oh, I didn't finish with the word. Super, we all know, means good, biggest, best, supermarket, Superman, and so on. And noesis is a tricky Greek word that means, roughly speaking, means mind and spirit. You perhaps have heard of the Institute of Noetic Sciences in California that was started by Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut. So he obviously looked up some Greek words. But so supernoetics is best of mind or best of being, the most outstanding, the biggest, or from above. And I think it sums up well what it is that I'm trying to do here. So I'm going to take a tiny little division of it and something that came up this morning and talk to you about it. Punk psychology. Now the word, well, I'll tell you what gave me the idea. I came across this book, and I don't know if you've read it, but it's called Punk Science, and it's by Manjir Samantha Lawton. No idea who this person is. Manjir makes me think Indian. Samantha Lawton sounds horribly English to me, so I don't know who the person is. I should Google and get a picture and see what person wrote that book, but it's a very engaging book. And it's punk, in other words, it doesn't do all the average and ordinary and boring garbage that's out there. It takes a completely refreshing view. And so I'd like to think that that's what I'm doing with this book here, Punk Psychology, which I wrote earlier this year, and I launched it as a sort of public experiment, if you like. Went out on the internet and using social media and said, hey, come and join us, for no fee, you can dive in. We'll download you some chapters and we'll do some webinars and things, and we'll see if we can teach the layman to do something, because you're not going to change the world with certified counselors, therapists, hypnotists, or anything else. We're going to need a mass movement if you're going to do any good. So my first question was, can we teach the ordinary person off the street? And that's what this book was written for. It was to support that project. And I'd like to just tell you a little bit about it. The fundamental premise for punk psychology is that what's wrong with most people is that they're not sufficiently in the here and now. Now, I know gurus say that, but they don't do anything about it. Be in the now. Well, how can you be in the now if your dad died 6 months ago and you can't shake it out of your mind? It's no good saying, be in the now. It doesn't work. And in fact, all of us have experiences in the past to which we're kind of over-wedded, we're kind of stuck there, hypnotized by events from the past, if you like. So the idea is to unhypnotize the person. And the way we do that is a simple method, and it's been around in one form or another for a long time. Send the person back there and they re-experience it. But the way we do it is a special technique, and a very intense technique I've called Make It Now, or Make It Now technique, which shortens to MINT. And I got this is not Freud, okay? This is 21st century science, because studies at Harvard, and I think it was Yale, a couple of workers anyway, have been studying this sort of effect. And what they found in recent years, in the last 10 years only, is that memory is very plastic at the instant that you recall it. At that moment, what is happening is you think memory is just, there's a picture, we'll go and find it and haul it in. That's what you think of memory is, isn't it? What they found is it's not that at all. Memory is, I will recreate what happened there. Oh, that was interesting. You actually make up the memory on the spot. They call it reconsolidation. And don't worry about the background to it, because we haven't time. Just accept that that other people have said that and proved that, as it were, scientifically. And they proved it by using PTSD cases and so on, that you can actually tweak the memory at that moment. Well, I discovered that in the late 90s, long before they did, but I didn't call it reconsolidation. But I had this technique where at the moment when a person is back there, intensely being there, in the moment, that you can actually restructure the memory. It's sort of backwards re-engineering of the past. It's a bit like abreaction, but it's a bit more complicated than that. So it's got some similarities to Freud. But in fact, I treasure a much earlier teacher, well, not much earlier, but a 19th century teacher called Pierre Janet. His name is written like Janet, but he's a Frenchman, so it's Janet. And Pierre Janet was a brilliant genius. He was the man that gave us the word, the unconscious mind. You see, up to that point, everyone thought, well, if you couldn't remember anything, it's because there wasn't a memory. Gone, And Pierre Janet was successful in showing that those memories were indeed there. And what he also discovered, in a way, was that the most powerful ones, the most damaging ones, are the ones you can't get at. And so that's if you like, what Freud called the subconscious. But Freud really just basically ripped off Pierre Janet's work, passed it off as his own, and they had quite a bitter quarrel. And Pierre Janet sadly died of a rather unrecognized man. But history's been kind. Everyone laughs at Freud now. He's just a laughable footnote in history, some idiot obsessed with sex. Whereas Pierre Janet's star is on the rise now, and everybody's using and quoting his brilliant work. He used hypnotism and those type of things to explore the mind, and he gave us some very gifted materials. He didn't give us the Make It Now technique, that's from Scott-Mumby, but he set me on the right track when I don't know if I've got a book here, but anyway, I'll try and find it, but it's about yay thick, a book, and it's called The Unconscious Mind, and it's the story of, how it was discovered. So you need to realize that it's only in the last 150 years we've actually understood that there is such a thing as an unconscious mind. I wrote, about 20 years ago, I wrote something that I called my Freudian axioms. Now, Freud never wrote any axioms, so it's my extractions from his work. But since then, and having discovered much more about his interactions with Pierre Janet, I should probably call them the Janet axioms, or the Freudian Janet axioms. I got smart, Alec, and I've called it the punk psychology axioms. They're mine now. But you can follow this thread of learning. Basically, that memory is the moment-to-moment recording of what happened to a person and their experience. And as I said, we find that in fact it's all there, whether the person knows it or not. So it's a kind of running record of what happened to the person in this universe. And I put it in such broad terms because, reincarnation and past life memories come up routinely when we do this. You ask a person, is there an earlier time you had this pain in the chest? Oh my God, I'm a Roman soldier, there's a spear in my chest. We don't say that's crap. Don't pull yourself together. We accept that the person is remembering some earlier incarnation. Why not? If we're non-material beings here having a material experience as creatures, non-materiality can be anywhere and do anything. It's probably timeless. Well, in a sense, it's outside space-time. So, time and reincarnation, all those things, you would actually predict. But anyway, you don't have to accept beliefs like that. I'm just telling you it comes up. But memory is that experience. Now, the problem with memory is the ones that get buried. They are loaded with what we call charge, for want of a better word. And we can actually detect these on on a psychogalvanometer or galvanic skin response, biofeedback meter that works by galvanic skin response. And we find that there are certain memories that are clearly loaded, and the person was upset and hurt at the time. So we call it charge, which is kind of negative energy for want of something better. And it can be very early, but the fact that it's hidden means that the person can't see it. So when a person's upset about something, then this is an axiom, or a rule anyway. To me it's an axiom, that when the person says they know what's upsetting them, they are wrong, because if they were correct, they wouldn't be upset anymore, right? So when a person says, oh, my problem in life, my father abused me, yeah, well, maybe he did abuse them, but that's not the problem. The problem is in some way they're not letting go of it. But let me pick a much lighter-hearted example from my case files from about 30 years ago. A lady who was frightened of cats, and she knew why she was frightened of cats, she said, because she'd been attacked by a big tomcat and was very badly bitten and scratched. Made her cry and run off to mummy, and ever since then she's been frightened of cats. I knew instantly she was wrong, because she's still frightened of cats, so that couldn't have been the truth. Okay? We find when you get the truth, things realign in a very interesting way. So I ran her back through time. Freud called that unburdening. It's probably as good a word as any. You sort of scrape off the layers, and eventually something comes to light that's very early. And in this particular case, the woman suddenly recalled being a baby of about 5 or 6 months old. Mother had put her out in the crib out in the yard to get some sunlight and fresh air, and the cat had crept in and gone to sleep on the baby's face. So mother discovered this, and as mothers are wont to do, went hysterical. Oh my God, the baby's dead, the cat suffocated the baby, that damn cat, it's killed my baby. And on and on and on like that. And so you can see why she would carry a memory, a hidden memory, that made her frightened of cats. And the scratching episode at 4 really just reinforced that. But the actual cause was the childhood memory that early, and we do find memories before birth even, by the way. But how do I know that's correct? Because she laughed her head off for half an hour, and she's never been scared of cats since. So that is the truth about why she was scared of cats. So it's very important that we get access to the hidden memories, and we know how to do that. That's in the book, and I teach you how to do that, because it's nearly always the buried stuff or the so-called unconscious stuff that is the trouble. So there's another axiom, which is that if you can bring this thing into conscious light and see it, and you don't have to re-experience it, just seeing it will help, but if you re-experience it too, it kind of sheds its burden, you're freed, and you can see the real reason that something happened, and the person has a recovery. Let me tell you another example, again from my case book, just over the border in Utah, and I'm going back about 12 years now from when I first came here, but there was a lady she had a brain tumor, and she'd done rather well actually, and I got introduced to her and got the story from her. The background is she was famously cold, and she was happily married, and yet even she agreed, and she was quite cold and frigid, and the husband loved her, but he sort of endured this. And she couldn't remember anything earlier than 7 years old. Anyone can remember a memory in your first year? Anyone got a first year memory? Yeah, good. Has anyone got a second year memory? Good. Third year? Oh yeah, quite a few hands start going up around there. Yeah, so we can 2, 3, 4 years old, most people can start remembering things. This girl could remember nothing before 7 years old. So fast forward, make it now technique. We uncovered the most god-awful incident of sexual child abuse that I've ever come across. She was remembered being walked off into the forest by her grandfather, and there was a bunch of men in this hut in the forest. They stripped her and tied her to the bench and serially raped this child. 4 or 5 she must have been, and then said, if you tell anyone, we'll kill you. So you forget all about this never happened, and if you tell anyone, we'll kill you. So you can imagine what happened. She just closed down the whole thing, wouldn't remember it. But as we're all wise people here and understand holism and how health works, it will come out sooner or later. In some way, this festering pit of horribleness will come out. And in her case, it came out as a brain tumor. Well, when all this came out and she discovered what it really was, I won't say she laughed her head off, but at least she was relieved. She began to understand what it was all about. She understood what her brain tumor was all about. And it began to regress immediately, and eventually all the markers went to zero, and eventually it disappeared completely on X-ray. And years later, she's fine and healthy. She wouldn't even take vitamins and minerals. I said, come on, you've had a brain tumor, just look after yourself. She said, no, that was the cause of it. I'm totally sure that was the cause of it. So, believe me, hidden memory can be very deadly. And it's not necessarily as serious as abuse. You know, it could be like grandma nursed you through a violent measles, encephalitis, where you were delirious and raging. You know, mum had to go out to work, so granny was there. So granny is the person that you're most bonded with, the real primary caregiver in that family situation. So when grandma dies, the person can be absolutely destroyed, because as a child, as a baby, as an infant, raving with measles and encephalitis, they form the idea, well, granny's looking after me and she feeds me, and as long as granny's here, I'm quite safe. Then all of a sudden, granny goes and dies. The mind is saying, oh my God, I've lost the one important person in the world that I need. So, as I say, it needn't be just abuse, but something that amounts to a fairly serious loss or trauma for a person. I have invented a word that I use for these kind of experiences, and I call them, excuse me, I call them memonyms. It's from the Greek goddess Mnemosyne, which is memory. So, you all know what a mnemonic is? A little aid to memory. You all met that word? Anyone not met that word, mnemonic? Oh, okay, mnemonic. Let me give an example. How does it go? 30 days hath September, April, June and November. All the rest have 31 except February. No, that's a funny one. That's called a mnemonic, okay? Or here's another one, like months of the year, right? January, February, March, April, May, June, July, 31, because it's on a knuckle. August is 31, because it's on a knuckle. September, October, November, December. That's a mnemonic. It's an aid to remembering which months have 31 days, right? And it comes from the Greek goddess of memory, who is called Mnemosyne. So I coined this word memonyme, which we use, which means these dark, shadowy impressions that some of them are quite black, but you know, they give rise to the grey days and the dark days and so on. And we find that they're quite easy to get at if you know what you're doing. The technique is simple, it's very fast, you shunt it backwards and forwards past the person a few times. We use something called sensate awareness. When you put a person back in where's Bob? He'll confirm this with me as well, he does hypnotism. But you get a person back in an event and they're suddenly so totally there and so totally re-experiencing it, you know, they can suddenly have their arm paralyzed, or they suddenly go in the fetal position and they'll curl up on the sofa until you get them out of this again. They can re-experience the pain. The most extreme one I ever saw was a guy who had shrapnel in his leg for 40 years, and right in the moment of running, the memory of the impact of the shell hitting him, or the shell fragment, big clatter on the floor, and the body threw out the chunk of metal. It'd been in there for 40 years, and it just threw it out in the moment of replasticizing and rerunning this memory. Okay, so we call that sensate awareness, and we can use it. You know, if somebody says, oh, it's dark in here, or I've got a headache, say, okay, feel that headache, really bring on the headache, don't fight it, let it happen, and the person's there, and they'll suddenly burst into tears or something, and it's a birth incident or something, you know. So we've got some very clever tricks. I can't teach you supernoetics in an afternoon. I simply want to intrigue you enough that you think, oh, well, maybe I'll at least get the book. If you're a practitioner and you're lacking this sort of thing, you know, where you can de-stress your people, these machines are wonderful, you know, the things that we're learning, but that people's psychic lives as well often need to be addressed. So, you know, we need good nutrition, but we might need emotional and psychic detoxing as well, and that's where this comes in. So if you're a practitioner and feeling the need of something like that, I especially encourage you to go and have a look at it. Get the book, read it. If it seems good, remember the book is for the layman. I'll reiterate what I said, which is I did it as a sort of social experiment, see if we can teach man off the street what to do. For the more professional person, we do a rather more sophisticated training where we teach you the biofeedback system, so we know when we found a charge memonyme, we know when the charge is gone because the meter tells us so, and we know where next to look. I mean, the the point of the meter is very valuable. It will read on charge. So if we say to a person, tell us when you've had a rough time, and he says, oh, well, I was in the Vietnam War, but no, read. Don't go there. See, counsellor or psychotherapist, we dive at it. Oh, I know what's wrong with you, PTSD, you've been in the... Anyway, the idea was that I'd share with you, some of you will see it, and this could be good, and go for it straight away. Others, there are places on the web you can go and learn a little bit more. I've done a series of videos showing more about how we do this, and talking about things like, well, for example, the book has a chapter on past lives, because they will come on, sure as hell, they just come on, you can't stop it. But another technique we do that's important is taking the other person's point of view, being them, and we find that's very powerful. Like the girl I told you with the brain tumor, I didn't do this, I haven't seen her for nearly 10 years now. But if she came back and said, look, it's still bothering me a bit, what can we do? I would say, okay, well, let's run this from the perspective of your grandfather, who's the abuser. And it's very interesting how we always know what somebody's thinking, we always know what their emotion is. Even if they appear to be hostile, we can easily turn it around and go into their viewpoint. And it's remarkably healing, and it's compassionate, and you begin to learn that nobody's that evil, no matter how evil, that all people have their thoughts and their motivations and their own stupid ideas. So it teaches you, forgiveness and things like that much more easily. And another technique I developed around about 1994, I call rewriting personal history. Okay, so if you made a real balls of it, you can reprocess the whole memory, being a star. You did it so well. I'll use a past life example. You were in the battlefield and you were a coward and ran off and disgraced yourself. Well, I said, well, let's do it different. This time you whip out your sword, you charge into the enemy, chop off 12 heads, and you're elected king. Isn't that better? And so we on that as a memory, and you say, well, it's a fake memory, that isn't really what happened. Well, that's true, but point one, it works exactly as if it was a real memory. You can install it just like it was a real memory. Secondly, it has the positive effect you'd expect. It does turn the person around. And thirdly, what is real memory anyway? Apart from taking photographs on your smartphone, memory is only memory. It's only a thought form of the past. And we all know how notoriously unreliable memory is. You can have 10 people see an accident and you get 10 different descriptions of what really took place. Well, if you go a long way back, nobody knows really what really happened. But those kind of, it's like pulling out a bad file that's corrupted and slotting in a nice new file. Hey, why not? I can tell you this, which is it works wonderfully, and I've been doing it for over 20 years, so it works really well. So if a person made a real pig's ear of it and comes out with shame and a lot of hurt, you can fix that for the person by substituting a better memory, rewriting personal history, in other words. And there's a chapter on that too. Okay, well, I'm conscious of the fact I'm interrupting what is a wonderful class and teaching program. So I'd like to wind it up by just saying, if there's any questions, please ask. If it's of any benefit to the group, I will answer. If it seems not likely, I'll say, see me afterwards. Okay? But I think I've covered the ground. I've only tried to intrigue you. I've not tried to teach you. There isn't time. I've tried to open a path for you so you can buy the book and read that if it sounded intriguing. If you're a practitioner that could probably use this kind of approach to health and healing, then you might want to consider the professional route too. Just be in touch. We're sending... Laurie, have we sent around the paper for email addresses and things yet?
No.
Okay, well, at some stage we're going to send around a paper. We want to know who you are and your email address. Vivian knows everything. She's the goddess, but she's not here. so you'll have to leave us a list of who you are so that I can write to you with some links to go and see videos and things like that. But remember, it isn't just diving inside a person's skull and trying to re-engineer who they think they are. There's stuff like this, wonderfully exciting courses like Flourish and Prosper, and Prosperity in You, Flourish and Beyond, and the Anatomy of Relationships. Those are three of the really core ones that we've got going now. There's links and videos everywhere, so you've only got to ask me. And use the Scott-Mumby@gmail.com. That goes to Vivian, but she passes it on to me. I try and not give out my personal email. I already get bombarded with spammers as it is. All right, Maestro, they're all yours. Oh, sorry, no, they're not all yours. Sit down. Anyone have a relevant, broad question that would enlighten others in the audience? No? Good. Great. I was either brilliant or bored you shitless. John will now resume. Thank you very much for listening anyway.